Before starting, please do subscribe to my channel so that I can make more videos of K-drama stories. Episode 1 starts in 1960, and it's mostly about the relationship between our heroine, Hae-joon, and her mother, Gwang-rae. Our story is set on Jeju Island, a place buried in myth and rumors where Gwang-rae single-handedly supports her 3 kids working as a henio, one of the famed female deep-sea divers of Jeju, who earn a living by selling the seafood they catch. The family is dirt poor. Gwang-rae's first husband died, that's Hae-joon's father, and now she's supporting her unemployed partner, Bae Young-chul, and sent Hae-joon off to live with her birth father's family. And right away, we see glimpses of the day-to-day discrimination that's in for our women characters, as Hae-joon isn't fed the same as the boys. Initially, the mother-slash-daughter dynamic is that Hae-joon is desperate for her mother's attention, while Gwang-rae is brusque, ignoring her daughter's bids for affection. But our 10-year-old heroine has the heart of a poet, and when mom finds one of Hae-joon's poems, worrying about her mom, expressing loneliness, and vowing to someday be the breadwinner, she's moved to tears and action. She storms into the house where Hae-joon lives with her uncle and his family, and starts wrecking the place, asking if the fish is so expensive that they can't feed her daughter the same as the other kids. She takes hold of Hae-joon and brings her home to live with her, where the two develop a new relationship. From there, we see Gwang-rae go to extreme lengths to try to ensure that Hae-joon does not follow in her footsteps and become a henio, which is dangerous work, and which Gwang-rae is ill from. But this is also where subtle politics enters the picture, mapping the times in post-war South Korea. For example, when Hae-joon wins her fellow students' votes to become class president, the teacher awards the position to another student, who's a boy, but also the son of a general. The drama does a balancing act between showing us the political and gendered realities of the times with newspaper headlines and radio voiceovers, look out for spies, denounce the miniskirt, but also letting the camera settle on the moonlit sea, as traditional music plays, a reminder that people find beauty in the darkest of places. When Gwang-rae hears about the class president thing, she breaks her back to get some fancy attire and pay off the teacher, but Hae-joon says she'll settle for VP. Gwang-rae tells her not to settle. I'm the poor one, not you. Don't hold back. Live your life to the fullest. Yet, as the show goes on, we see that circumstance, more than ambition, will determine both of their lives. Gwang-rae keeps diving, even though it's killing her, saying she'd rather die working than begging. We learn that at that time, the average Korean lifespan was 52, and when Gwang-rae is finally taken away from Hae-joon for good, she's only 29. The actresses playing the henio are older than their characters, showing how their work has aged them, which makes this revelation feel even more shocking. Following her mom's death, Hae-joon wants to abide by her mother's advice and return to her uncle so that she can go to college, study Korean literature, and become a poet. But Bae Young-chul convinces her to stick around and help him raise the 2 younger kids. She learns to farm and cook, and by the time she's a senior in high school, he's still giving her excuses to stay behind and help him out with the household. When we see her selling cabbages in the marketplace, it's 1967 and Hae-joon is now played by IU. Except, she's not actually selling those cabbages herself. The cute little boy who followed her around during all of their childhood, feeding her fish when she had none of her own, is doing the work for her. This is Yang Gwon-chik, Park Bo-gum, and he can't see anything but her. The thing about Gwon-chik's character is that he's set up from the very beginning to have his heart set on Hae-joon. What's interesting though is that his actions are so simple, there's really nothing romantic about his pursuit, which makes the entire thing somehow more romantic. However, it confuses Hae-joon. He's feeding her, carrying her stuff, selling her produce. Does he pity her, or what? You think I gave you fish for 10 years out of pity, he responds. And while the drama has made sure to keep a light tone up to this point, the interactions between these young adult leads are when the fun starts. We begin to get glimpses of another timeline, in the early 90s, where Hae-joon has grown kids of her own. We know the story we're seeing in the 60s is really a memory, it's a story being told about the past. This gives the drama the freedom to embellish and make a tall tale out of what happens between Hae-joon and Kwon-shik back then. It's got a hue of nostalgia, but it's also got the hindsight of people who survived something. It might not have been funny then, but it sure is funny now, and that's the story we get to see as viewers, the way they remember it, not necessarily the way it happened. And in this tale, our born-into-poverty protagonists are epic heroes. The primary conflict at this stage is that Kwon-shik's Halmyeonai doesn't want him marrying Hae-joon. She's got nothing going for her, according to Grandma, and she and Kwon-shik's mother will do anything to keep them apart. To Kwon-shik's credit, he's 100% on Hae-joon's side. He's not scared of his grandmother, but he is worried about how Hae-joon will be treated in his family if she enters it. Beyond that, he's got to convince Hae-joon to get on board with a marriage. She's determined to find a way to get to Seoul and go to college. Why would she marry an island boy when she could find a guy in Seoul? But really, for all the temper and attitude she gives Kwon-shik, she really wants him to make a move, not just keep trying to feed her fish. One day as they're walking home through a field, he finally goes for it, grabbing hold of her hand, which she's already put in his jacket pocket. Then they have their first awkward kiss, totally tensed up and unsure how long to hold the pose. It's what she wanted, but still, she's not going to marry him, she says. That is, until she runs out of options. We learn that Bae-yeong-chul has a new woman living with him, supporting him, and she doesn't want Hae-joon in the house. He has no money to send her to college like he promised, and her uncle wants her to go work in a factory in the city and send money home. No money, no family, nowhere to turn, she runs to Kwon-shik. This could have been a really sad and dramatic moment, but that's not the tone of this drama. Instead, she's sobbing so much that she's almost unintelligible, but we can still hear her insulting Kwon-shik for just being a guy from Jeju. For his part, he only wants to be what she wants him to be, and he starts trying to recite some poetry he learned. He's not good at it, and she just wants him to shut up and go back to taking care of her, which is what he's good at. They hug, and the next thing we know, it's 1968, and the two are running away together. Hae-joon steals a bunch of jewelry and clothes from the woman living with Bae-yeong-chul, and Kwon-shik robs his mom and grandma. Then, the two lovebirds board a boat for the mainland, posing as a newlywed couple, though they're still minors. Again, the lives of our leads line up with the political terrain of the country as they're asked for ID during a hunt for North Koreans. The voiceover tells us there was a recent coup, but it wasn't as revolutionary as they'd hoped. And wouldn't you know it, you could say the same for this runaway plan. They land in Busan, try to sell the jewelry, and are rebuffed, because it's obviously stolen, and they're clearly underage. So, they try to get a motel for the night, and are robbed of their stolen goods by the couple who owns the place. They get tossed out in the street, with nothing to their name, not wanting to go home, when they decide to steal back their twice stolen loot. They sneak into the motel at night, but are only able to get the cash box. Just as they're about to escape, the couple's kid starts screaming, and they're chased into an alley by the motel owners. The wife tackles Hae-joon while Kwon-shik runs off ahead. She tells him to go without her, but instead, he throws down the cash box and takes a flying leap at the husband, as Hae-joon headbutts the wife. It's our OTP's first fight, but luckily it's not with each other. After the police station, Kwon-shik's mom tracks them down, gets back her jewelry, and takes the pair back to Jeju. And this is when we see how awful the repercussions are for Hae-joon compared to Kwon-shik. Rumors go around about her. She spent the night in a motel with the guy she ran away with. She's expelled from school, and Kwon-shik's family hates her even more now. Kwon-shik only gets a warning at school, and there are no rumors that'll ruin his reputation. He's holding on to the idea of Hae-joon kneeling before her uncle, but Hae-joon is way down in the dumps feeling hopeless. She's convinced, by her family and Kwon-shik's, to go out with a divorced dad who's much older than her. He's rich and willing to take her in because he needs someone to raise his kids. He's even willing to overlook her past with another man, he tells her at their first meeting, as he screams at the cafe staff, hint, this guy is abusive. Kwon-shik is just a crying mess now, in tears in front of anyone with authority, trying to convince them that he and Hae-joon should be together. But when he finally drags her away from the guy she's supposed to marry and presents her with a ring, it's Hae-joon herself that says it's never happening. This rich guy will send her to college so she can be a poet, and then no one will speak badly of her again. Let me change the fate you pity, she says. Kwon-shik asks if he's standing in her way. She basically says yes, telling him that he has to leave so she can live her life. And then he's full on crying again. They part ways and she's set to marry this other dude, when we learn that she let Kwon-shik go because of something his mother said, that Hae-joon was the one standing in Kwon-shik's way. Essentially, they both backed away from each other for the same reason. And without Hae-joon to follow around and care for, Kwon-shik really has no life. His only ambition is to be by her side. She's the one with all the hopes and dreams. And yet, the culture and society are telling her no and slamming the door. The day comes when Kwon-shik's family puts him on a boat to the mainland to pursue athletics. And it's the same day that Hae-joon is being fitted for her wedding clothes. As the minutes tick by, Hae-joon realizes that she can't do it. She runs from the store, all the way to the pier where Kwon-shik's ship is already far off in the distance. It's raining, she's in her new skirt suit, and she sits on the pier and sobs, calling his name until she's sobbing, "Mom, Mom." And it looks like our heroine has lost everything, as she knows it. Kwon-shik in this epic tall tale hears his name from afar, sees her on the pier, and jumps ship. Then, in a matter of minutes, he courses through the water like a sea animal, until he reaches the rocky wall of the shore, scales it, and grabs Hae-joon in a tight embrace. They're crying, hugging, shaking until the punchline, "I have to pay for these clothes. Yaa. Haha. We see them in the 90s timeline again, where the older Hae-joon, Moon Sori, is at home with her daughter, Jun-young, also played by IU, and Kwon-shik's now grown-up baby sister, Jun-young Co Hae-won. We learn that the night in the motel in Busan resulted in Jun-young, who was born 8 months after the wedding, soon after that pier incident. But when Jun-young was born, the 18-year-old Hae-joon dropped her aspirations, fell in love with her new daughter, and decided to embrace her role as a mother and wife who stays at home. We get scenes of the young couple with their new baby, both of them beaming with happiness. But at the same time, they move in with Kwon-shik's family, where Hae-joon is abused by her mother-in-law, as well as Kwon-shik's grandmother. The bond between Hae-joon and Kwon-shik is strong, but she never tells him what happens to her in his absence. Still, like her own mother, Hae-joon wants more for her daughter. "I don't want her to set the table, I want her to flip the table," Hae-joon tells Kwon-shik, asking for his help in standing up for Jun-young against his mom and grandma. She wants Jun-young to do whatever she wants, not only the things allowed for girls. But the older women stand by traditional gender roles. Kwon-shik defies these gender roles in a lot of ways, right from the beginning. For instance, when they were kids, and Hae-joon told the Hae-yo that she was going to be president one day, the women asked Kwon-shik what he wanted to be. "First lady," he answered. And when it comes time to stand up for his wife and daughter, he uses that defiance in small ways that mean a lot, like sitting at the same table as them during family meals, and letting his female child have all the food she wants, even though it's supposed to go to the men. When Kwon-shik's mom and grandma decide that Jun-young should grow up to be a Hae-yo, Hae-joon thinks of her own mother, how she lived, and how she died, and flips out. She won't allow that for her daughter, she says, before getting slapped in the face. Kwon-shik comes home from work just as this happens, grabs his wife's hand, picks up his daughter, and says to the other women in his family that they won't see them again. They leave and that's that. But they're broke, living on their own. In order to pay the bills, Kwon-shik takes a job on a fishing boat, working for the abusive ass that Hae-joon was supposed to marry. He never tells Hae-joon who he's working for, but she starts to realize he's coming home with bruises all over him. Pregnant for a second time, Hae-joon marches to the dock, kicks the guy in the shin, and says her husband isn't working there anymore. And that's the send-off for spring as we wait for next week's installment, which will take us into the summer of these characters' lives. Wow. I would love to go into more depth about this, but I think you should just watch it. I thought this was going to be a romance, focused equally on the two characters, but this is more Hae-joon's story. And as we see further into what's happening in the 90s timeline, with the grown Jun-young also planning to marry, and also sitting before a horrible soon-to-be mother-in-law, I'm enthralled with what this drama is saying about progress. There are the obvious nods to politics and economics as we see the recent history of Korea. But the thread about women, which is connecting the societal level changes with the lives of these specific characters, is nicely done. On one hand, we see that Jun-young is working a corporate job in the 90s, meaning women have entered this sphere. On the other, her prospective mother-in-law is telling her to quit and stay home when she gets married. Plus, she's got the baggage of knowing her own mother wasn't able to go to college, even though her husband wanted her to go and succeed. But the really interesting dynamic, which is well observed on the part of the writer, is that Hae-joon wanted to work so her mother didn't have to. When she couldn't save her mom, she tried to save herself, and finally, she put all her efforts into her daughter. But in the next generation, Jun-young is supporting herself partially due to those efforts, and she talks back to her mom, saying she doesn't want to end up like her. It's a fascinating shift, where Hae-joon's motivation was to take care of her mom, and Jun-young's is to not suffer like her mom. The story has me in its claws, waiting for more on this theme of what it means to progress. Apart from that, Park Bo-gum is back. And who knew I missed him on my screen so much? He just lights up the place. I love how he and IU are handling the humor here, with the strategy of the show to take us to the brink of sadness, and then pull back into jokes. They've got the right level of playfulness. I will be very happy to stay with this one to the end, through all the small sufferings and larger oppressions, as well as all the simple love and big messages. Hae-joon had just stood up for her husband against an abusive boss. The problem when we start our summer segment is that Kwon-shik is now out of work, and he doesn't know what to do with himself. As the son of a fisherman, he's been working since he could walk, basically, and Hae-joon is watching him wither away into depression at home. As the rice jar gets lower, Hae-joon makes a visit to her paternal grandmother, where she kneels and cries, but can't utter the words to ask for help. She leaves empty-handed and cries at home, telling her husband that she thought once you grew up, you'd naturally learn how to do all the things adults do. She's overwhelmed as a first-time parent and wife and wonders if everyone else has life under control. The drama dives back into its theme of female survival across generations, and not long after we see Grandma at Hae-joon's house, handing her everything she has to her name, which turns out to be a lot. She's been stashing money since before the war. She tells the young couple to buy a boat, so that Kwon-shik can be his own captain, and the pair cry and say they'll make her proud. We see a flashback to right before Hae-joon's mother died, where she's asking this grandmother to help out Hae-joon just once. She's a proud kid, Kwon-ri says. She won't ask for help easily. So if she ever asks, it means life has gotten unbearable. Both women are in tears, and Kwon-ri pleads, help her out like you would your own son. The subtext is that the money is supposed to go to the eldest grandson, not a granddaughter, so what Kwon-ri is asking is bigger than it might initially sound. Grandma says she will, and now she's living up to her word. Kwon-shik buys the boat, and on the day they're inaugurating it, Hae-joon goes into labor with baby number 2, a boy. By 1974, Kwon-shik has made enough money to buy back Hae-joon's mother's house for them, and the family of 4 moves into their own digs for the first time. And by the time their third baby is born, Hae-joon is even driven to the hospital by a neighbor who has a vehicle, rather than hauled in a wagon by her husband. Time starts skipping along, and in 1978, Hae-joon becomes the first female deputy chief of their town. Unfortunately, the chief she has to work beside is the jerk she was supposed to marry, the one that abused Kwon-shik. Still, it's a big deal to have a woman hold that office. Plus, it reminds Hae-joon that she didn't marry for money, she married for happiness, and it paid off. There's a small breakthrough moment when Kwon-shik asks Hae-joon to board his boat to paint the name. But it's bad luck for women to board boats, and so she refuses. Hearing the conversation, the young Jun-young starts to hop on and Hae-joon pulls her back. But then, she realizes she can't tell her own daughter she's bad luck, and she lets her go with Kwon-shik, happy to have her on board. It's summer, they've got their own house and livelihood, and the couple couldn't be happier. But with 3 young kids at home, Hae-joon is struggling to keep up. On a day when a typhoon is brewing, Jun-young goes to ride her bike, and has a minor accident. Hae-joon hears this and runs out to find her daughter, leaving the 2 boys at home. Jun-young is fine, but when Hae-joon returns, both boys are gone. They find one of them immediately, the middle child, and then the whole village goes out in the wind and rain searching for the littlest one, who's only 3. When they find him, he's not alive. Hae-joon sits on the ground, cradling her baby, wind whipping around her, asking why no one is calling an ambulance. Everyone is standing around her crying when Kwon-shik runs up, collapses to his knees, and wails. Hae-joon is blank-faced, in shock about the reality of what's happening. This event has repercussions for the whole family for the rest of their lives. Hae-joon suffers horrible guilt following the event, especially because the last thing she did was yell at her son for knocking over a candy dish before she ran out to find Jun-young. And the parents are in so much pain that they're unwittingly ignoring their other kids, walking around like they're dead themselves. One day Kwon-shik realizes that Jun-young hasn't showed him any of her perfect schoolwork and asks why. She breaks into convulsive sobs, saying it's all her fault. If she hadn't been riding her bike in the typhoon, this wouldn't have happened. And at the same moment, Hae-joon learns that the reason her living son isn't talking to her is not because he's angry with her about the death, but because he too feels like it's his fault. If he hadn't left the house first, then his little brother wouldn't have trailed behind him. The parents suddenly realize they're not the only ones living in pain and guilt, and break out of the spell they've been under. Kwon-shik goes back out to fish, understanding he needs to keep working to support the lot. But still, he blames himself for the rest of his life. When we hit 1987, we see that Jun-young takes after her studious mom. But in this new generation, the girl goes to college. SNU to be exact, which is a lot pressure. Not only is it the best university in the country, it's also all the way in Seoul, and it's Jun-young's first time living in a city. Her parents go with her to the admissions ceremony, where all the families are taking photos of their newly admitted smarty-pants kids, and one of those smarties sets his eyes on Jun-young instantly. This is Park Young-beom, and we see that his mother is the horrible, rich mother-in-law that Jun-young was meeting with in last week's episodes. Meaning these two are getting hitched sometime in the 90s. Of course, Kwon-shik hates him immediately and Hae-joon is all for him. I mean, she may have married a Park Bo-gum lookalike, but she still has eyes. And the 2 kids start dating in Seoul, while Jun-young's parents are far, far away. At the same time, Kwon-shik and Hae-joon are just as in love as they've always been, which, unfortunately, puts even more pressure on Jun-young to have a fairytale marriage, as well as to perform perfectly as the successful child who got out of Jeju. As the nation starts preparing for the 1988 Olympics, as well as the vote that will return them to democracy, there's a lot of political shakeup. First, the Olympics Commission comes to their seaside town and starts overturning vendors' stands at the fish market. The torch will run through there and be televised, and they've been told to get rid of anything unsightly. The Hae-joon argue back, but their words don't get them far, especially with the jerk town chief on the government's side. This is when we see how far Hae-joon has come from the literary girl who couldn't put down a book to sell cabbage. As deputy chief, she strolls up to the conflict without saying a word and lays down in front of the trucks. As is the tone of the drama, it's played for laughs, but the outcome is serious to the townspeople. The next thing we know, Hae-joon is running for chief against the current guy who has the position. His MO is to badmouth her and bring up her bad reputation from high school. She ran off at 18 and got pregnant. He cries. But the oldest woman in the crowd replies, "And now that kid's at SNU." So satisfying. Meanwhile, Kwon-shik, now played by Park Hae-joon, is covertly campaigning for her amongst the fishermen. They make fun of him though. Doesn't he have any pride? How could he let his wife be the first female chief? What would that make him? But of course, We know Gwon-sik has no problem being first lady if it means Hae-joon finally gets to move from VP to Prez. And she does. Since the former chief was running a smear campaign, it didn't look good when he was caught putting the moves on someone who was not his wife. So, Hae-joon gets her dream of occupying the top position, and at the election party, she gets drunk and dances in a way that embarrasses her teenage son, Yang Ian My-young, Kang Yusok. Let her have fun, Gwon-sik says. And it becomes totally clear just how removed their kids are from the hardships of the parents' younger lives. Times have changed way too much. Back in Seoul, Jeju My-young is on her own again, because Yeonbyum has gone to do his military service. She broke it off with him before he left, and we see her get into a fancy car with a man who looks suspiciously like Kim Jae-young. I had no idea this cameo was coming, and I about jumped out of my chair. And although rumors are circulating about what she's doing with him, we quickly learn that he's a driver for an extremely wealthy, but not too bright, high school student that Jeju My-young is tutoring. A headline tells us that private tutoring has been banned, and illegal services have cropped up in the oddest places, even moving cars. So, Jeju My-young is working illegally to pay her college expenses, and the rich girl's mom is about to take full advantage of that fact. The next time that Jeju My-young goes to the girl's house to tutor her, the mother tells her that they've been searching all over for a smart student who looks just like her daughter. She wants Jeju My-young to take the college entrance exam in her daughter's place. She may not have smarts, but she has money. They can help each other out. If the daughter gets into a top 3 school, she'll buy Jeju My-young a 3-bedroom apartment in Seoul. It just so happens that Jeju My-young has not received a scholarship for this term, and she's being kicked out of the dorms. The rents are so expensive that she's not sure she'll have a place to live. She could really use the payoff, but at the same time, she's ethical to the core. She turns down the offer saying she couldn't bear it if the daughter got into a school, and it bumped someone like Jeju My-young from getting in. The woman insults her, muttering that poor people have nothing but pride, and Jeju My-young leaves the apartment, taking with her the money she's owed. But on the way out of the building, the security guard stops her, and says the woman reported that she stole some money, along with a diamond ring. Jeju My-young tries to give him the money, but without producing the ring, she's taken to the police station. The police believe the rich woman over Jeju My-young, because Jeju My-young was working illegally as a tutor, i.e. she's poor enough to need the money that badly, so she must be a thief. When she's released from the station, she calls her mom from a payphone, but can't bear to tell her what happened. She learns that her father, at that very moment, is in Seoul waiting to see her. She feels angry at her mom for being poor, which I read as terrible pressure to succeed without all the resources to do it. And at the same time, she's angry that her dad has been sitting in the cold waiting for her. He's showing her care when she feels like she's letting them down. When she meets up with Gwon-sik, he takes her to eat, and she tells him she lost her job, didn't get a scholarship, and will have to leave the dorms. He says that all the best minds from the whole nation are compiled in one university. She can't always be perfect. He wouldn't even be able to share a table with them. But what was meant as comfort just feels more overwhelming to Jeju My-young, who's sitting at the table for her whole family. She's experiencing social mobility, moving up in class position, but she feels greedy and selfish for wanting all the things she wants, while we see the rich people around her feel entitled to those very same things for no good reason either. Her dad tells her to find an apartment, he'll catch more fish to pay the rent. He wants her to do everything she wants. Just don't date a soldier, or get involved in the protests. He's worried she'll be beaten or killed, and this where those other political shakeups I was talking about come in. They're sitting at the bus station waiting for Gwon-sik to board, and the election is on the TV. As everyone celebrates the results around them, father and daughter look sad, and Jeju My-young continues to cry. Her father came all the way to Seoul just to see her, and she feels guilty. The pressure to be perfect is so much it's like she can't stand displays of care or concern because she feels she can't live up to it. When Gwon-sik finally gets on the bus, he waves from the window and Jeju My-young is reluctant to wave back. She thinks of the phone call with her mother earlier when she said to be nice to him while he's there. He wanted to see his eldest and his love has been one-sided for 20 years. We see flashbacks to earlier scenes of when Jun-young was a toddler, and she and Hae-joon happily waved goodbye to Gwon-sik as he left for work. Then we see Gwon-sik on the bus in Seoul, waving to Jun-young, and she turns into that smiling waving toddler again in his eyes. I became such a sobbing, bawling mess during this scene. I had to pause the video because I couldn't see through my tears. And while the father/daughter scene was about as heartfelt as they come, this drama still has mothers and daughters at its center, which is why the conclusion left me even more of a wreck. It starts when Jun-young is selected to do a study abroad in Japan based on academic merit, but doesn't have the money to go. One of her professors really wants to send her, and is offering to pay for the trip. Jun-young turns it down, says some polite things, and calls her mom to tell her how good it feels just to have someone want to do that for her. Hae-joon starts asking how much the trip costs, and Jun-young won't even tell her, assuming it's out of reach, and also not wanting to be a burden. She realizes that while she can say such pretty things to the professor she's grateful to, she can't say nice things to the person she's most grateful to in the world, her mother. They argue on the phone, both trying to do what's right for the other, and resenting each other's behavior the whole time. The voiceover says a kind-hearted mother gave birth to a kind-hearted daughter. They would always adore each other, and break each other's hearts. In the end, the parents decide to sell their house, and move to a small apartment in order to send Jun-young abroad. On the plane, and with a stack of cash in her bag, Jun-young cries the whole ride. We see Hae-joon standing in the street, looking up at the tiny place they're about to move into, and smiling. She wanted so badly to study, and now she's sending her daughter all the way to study abroad. She's laughing, I'm sobbing. And that concludes
On
the
volume of
storytelling
Summer.
front. This centers us on Jun-young as the main protagonist, with the parents' lives and struggles coming alive only where they overlap with their kids. Jun-young is her parents' pride, and the drama maintains its pressure on the topic of progress. What does it mean for Jun-young to fully succeed? Does she have to marry up the economic echelons? Is being a working woman enough? These are internal questions, but they also reflect the changing times. When we left off, Jun-young was on her way to Japan to study abroad. When we return, we've skipped over that part and see her in 1990, living as a boarder with a family in Seoul. The room she's renting doesn't offer the best conditions. There's a small child that enters as he pleases, a patriarch who wants Jun-young to feel grateful that they've given her housing, and a grown-up daughter who sneaks her boyfriend into the house against her father's wishes. That boyfriend is an aspiring artist named Park Chung-seob, Kim Sun-ho, and Jun-young first comes face to face with him when he's hiding in her closet to avoid his girlfriend's dad. From there, they have another random meeting while Jun-young is looking at job postings on a bulletin board, and Chung-sub hooks her up with a gig selling tickets at the cinema, where he also works. Little by little, they interact on the job, as well as on the walks home, because it seems that Chung-sub is still visiting his girlfriend, even after Dad discovered him in the closet. The quiet shots of the two getting to know each other are threaded throughout the episodes, and they run parallel and counterpoint to the main focus, which is Jun-young's deteriorating relationship with Yongbyeom. We meet back up with Jun-young and Yongbyeom when he visits her ticket booth and drops his change, along with a ring, into Jun-young's hand. It seems like she's been expecting him because she goes on break and runs to an empty theater, where the two embrace and he whirls her around. He's been out of the country, and this is their first reunion in some time. It's off to a bad start though. Jun-young wants to show Yongbyeom her life in Seoul, but, as she's walking him to her boarding house, he starts criticizing the neighborhood. From his side, when he sees how run down the area is, he says it's not safe for her to live there. But from her side, it sounds patronizing and out of touch. They argue, and he says she doesn't really know Seoul. She retorts that he's the one that doesn't really know Seoul, and this a clear dig at his upper-class position. If you recall, in the first volume of episodes, we saw Jun-young in the early 90s talking to a potential mother-in-law, and being asked to quit her job when she gets married. We later learned that this woman, Jun-young, Kang Myung-ju, is Yeonbyum's mom. Up to this point, it wasn't clear if Jeju goes through with the marriage or not. Here, we finally get the answer, and the lead-up is a terrible thing to witness. Jun-young degrades Jeju, as far as I can tell, for growing up poor and not being from Seoul. While it's true that we've seen 2 generations of mothers-in-law that are not nice to their sons' wives, the social class dimension is what makes these current interactions different. It's not only that Jun-young talks down to Jeju, but that Jeju appears to be unsure of her own value in the situation. 2 things play into this. First, while the love that Yeonbyum has for Jeju is clear, he wants to protect her, he wants to do right by her. It's not in his personality to cause conflict in any form. There's a moment when Jeju is in tears after an interaction with his mother, and she tells him he has to be a good son, or a good husband. He can't be both. Yeonbyum replies, "What man could choose one over the other?" And Jeju doesn't miss a beat when she says, "My dad." This is particularly important, because we've seen various moments where both Kwon-shik and Hae-joon hear how Yeonbyum expresses his love for Jeju, and both of them think that he sounds just like Kwon-shik when he was courting Hae-joon. But we'll come to see that the 2 are not alike in the moments that matter most. Because when it comes down to it, Yeonbyum's determination to remain neutral is the same as not being on Jeju side. The second thing that plays into Jeju insecurity about her own worth has to do with her parents, and how they interact with Yeonbyum's parents. This becomes evident the first time the 2 families meet at a lunch in Seoul, where Jeju mom and dad have traveled from Jeju to get there, and it's Yeonbyum's parents who are an hour late. Hae-joon and Kwon-shik are polite and accommodating, while Jun-young and her husband stride in without apology. Right away, they start criticizing Jeju, and we get inside Hae-joon's head through flashbacks to see how she's perceiving it. As she watches Jeju serve the other 5 people at the table, she realizes that Jeju hasn't left enough stew for herself, and has a paltry amount in her bowl. Hae-joon blames herself, remembering how she did the same with her in-laws, and thinks, children do what they saw growing up. Hae-joon switches her overfull bowl with Jeju, and at first no one says anything about it. But a little later, Jun-young starts complaining that she won't be able to hand over her household duties to Jeju after the wedding, because she doesn't know anything. Look how she ladled the soup. At this, as polite as he can be, Kwon-shik says that as a working woman it will probably be difficult for Jeju to take care of the household duties. And Jun-young tells him that's why she's asked Jeju to quit her job. The bride's parents go quiet, while the groom's parents insult Jeju and order her around until they're essentially insulting Hae-joon and Kwon-shik for not raising their daughter right. When Jeju is ordered to dish up more food, Kwon-shik looks at Yeonbyum and nods in his direction. It's a gesture that says help her. And we see flashbacks to that moment in the 60s when Kwon-shik decided to sit at the table with his wife and daughter during family meals, when it was not customary to do so. Jeju-young's voiceover says that Kwon-shik fought his own war, and he never left mom stranded alone on the battlefield. I'll be honest, I cried here, because Jeju deserves so much better than this. To his credit, Yeonbyum stands to help Jeju, but Hae-joon tells both kids to sit and she begins to ladle the soup. Jun-young remarks that the reason Jeju doesn't know anything is because her mother does it all for her. Hae-joon, with a voice that's about to break but a look that doesn't waver, says that her daughter was too precious to her. She chose not to teach her those things. And then she serves Jeju first, rather than last. Now, with that kind of defiance, we might think that Jeju would understand her mother's position. But she doesn't. After the tense meal, Hae-joon and Jeju can hardly look at each other, and they go separate ways when Jeju rides with her soon-to-be in-laws. Mother and daughter are both questioning why the other is so docile in front of these people, when that's not the way they usually behave. This comes to a head when the women go to pick out fabric for the wedding hanbok, and Jun-young dictates what Hae-joon is going to wear. Hae-joon says nothing, and neither does Jun-young. Later, mother and daughter get into an argument when they're alone. Jun-young is yelling, asking why Hae-joon didn't stand up for the hanbok she wanted. "Do you think he's better than me?" she asks, wanting to know if her mother doesn't think she's worth standing up for. Hae-joon explains that she doesn't want his family to be cold to Jun-young. "How can I act on my temper and send you to their family?" she asks. Both of these women want the other to speak out, and both are holding back for the sake of the other. Jun-young seems to think that marrying into a family like Yongbyum's will complete her success story, and Hae-joon and Kwon-shik want Jun-young to have everything she wants. Neither side is willing to jeopardize anything for the other, and it's got the makings of a tragedy, with all four parents wanting this relationship to end, but no one calling it off. Jun-young is the one to make the final decision. She finally talks back to Jun-young after she learns that Jun-young made Hae-joon cry. It happened at a lunch with just the two mothers, where Jun-young said she didn't like Jun-young because she wasn't from the same level of family. It doesn't matter that Hae-joon did her best to give Jun-young everything to outrun where she was born, she'll always carry baggage from struggling. She's not good enough for Yongbyum, who's his mother's masterpiece. Jun-young tells us that her first love didn't turn out to be a fairy tale, and we see Yongbyum in 2023, married to someone else, a person his mother selected, and both he and his aging mother are miserable. They've never gotten past the damage of him not marrying Jun-young, whom he truly loved, but wasn't able to fight harder for. The breakup isn't easy on Jun-young either. She tells us they were together for 7 years, and then spent a year separating. Neither wants to let the other go, but it just can't work out. His family will never like her, and, even if he cuts them off, it would hurt him, and she can't live with him suffering like that. And so, she has to be the harsh one at the end, telling him to stop trying. It's not about love, she loves him, but she loves herself too. And so, they sob and hug goodbye, and she tells us how much she's losing in Seoul, where I had no one. He was my lover, my family, and my best friend. After this, she goes into a funk and can't keep up with daily life. Her parents are worried about her, and one day, out of nowhere, she shows up at home in Jeju. With Jun-young away in the military, the house has been quiet, but now it's alive again, and the parents have a reason to prepare meals and show their love by stuffing Jun-young full of food. She eats and sleeps well, and after a few days, she goes out on the fishing boat with her dad. She's worried that her parents are embarrassed that she called off the wedding. But Kwon-shik says that she's good at everything, so he trusts that her decision is the right one. She cries and feels guilty for all she's been given. And it appears that her heartbreak is leading her to a place of appreciation for her parents, where she's starting to see from their perspective. When she talks to her mom later, she asks the same question about embarrassment and learns that Hae-joon never sent out the invitations. "I knew you'd call it off," Hae-joon smiles. "I raised you that way." And then she adds, "You didn't do anything wrong. You avoided stepping in a pile of poop because of your luck." The time with her parents leaves Jun-young restored and recuperated, and ready to face her life again in Seoul. When she's back in the city, we see her getting on a bus at the same time Chung-sub is getting off. He's fresh out of the military, and it's been a couple of years since they've seen each other. She doesn't notice him and the bus pulls away, while he chases after it, calling her name. He doesn't catch the bus, but we hear that a glistening winter is on its way. And we have a new romance to look forward to next week. We begin with a wedding in 1998, and then we go back in time to see how we got there. Financial trouble is stirring as companies start going under, and the next thing we know Jun-young is out of a job. The political protests that used to fill the streets are taken over by workers protesting layoffs. And then we see the government asking for a bailout due to national bankruptcy. We've reached the part of history now known as the IMF crisis. While Jun-young is going on one job interview after another with no results, she decides to go check out the little theater where she used to work with the artist, Chung-sub. She doesn't know it at the time, but Chung-sub is there too, sitting only a couple of seats away. We get a repeat of him chasing down her bus through the streets after the movie lets out, but this time he's determined to catch her. When he does, it's destiny. They go to a bar to catch up, where he's very nerdy and awkward, but all spiffed up from the days she knew him before. He teaches art now, and he admits he's been waiting for this day. They get very drunk, hold hands at the table, and that's a wrap. This is the pair that will be getting married in 1998. Before that, we see them dating adorably, where it's all laughter and flirtation. Jun-young knows she's met her match, and takes Chung-sub home to meet her parents, where he vomits over the side of Kwon-shik's fishing boat, and Kwon-shik pretends he hates him. The truth is that both parents approve, because he's so head over heels in love with their daughter. And at the wedding, we hear Jun-young say in voiceover that between Youngbeom and Chung-sub, it wasn't the size of the love that was different, but the temperature. With Chung-sub, it was the temperature that let me be myself. The wedding is pivotal not only because Jun-young is marrying a guy who's better suited for her, but because it marks another step in the generational trajectory, and Jun-young understands her parents' sacrifices. We may be in their winter, but this is only her spring, and she realizes that feeding on their verdant youth, I became a tree. Unfortunately, things aren't all roses for her brother, and just after Jun-young's wedding, Eun-young, who's newly a father, winds up in jail. Given the economic downturn, and the fact that Eun-young didn't have good job prospects to begin with, he was trying to start a business with a friend. But his business partner runs off with the goods from the pawn shop they've opened, saying that Eun-young is the culprit. Behind bars, Eun-young finally tells his parents exactly how he feels. He couldn't live up to his sister scholastically, and he's also been living in the shadow of his brother's death. He wanted the pawn shop so he could finally make some big money and show his parents that he's worth something too. Hae-joon takes all this in and cries, realizing that her wish to never hurt her kids did not come true. Kwon-shik swallows his pride and asks for a personal loan to bail out Eun-young, but is rejected, hearing that he's too old to earn the money to pay it back. Times have changed and no one fishes like he does anymore. He stays all day, asking and bowing, but finally we see him clearing out his boat after 20 years of fishing, and never taking a day off. He's selling the thing that gave his family their livelihood, and he weeps, thinking back on his springtime with Hae-joon. It's not spring anymore, and it hasn't been for a long time. When they use the money to bail Eun-young out of jail, Eun-young sobs in the street and asks, "Why would you do that for me?" They sold the house for Jun-young, and now the boat for him, but he's grown up thinking he wasn't valued the same as his sister. To his parents, he was. They never meant for it to turn out this way. Hae-joon sets up shop at the fish market, filleting squid for customers on their way out the door. She feels her life has shrunk, but puts on a bright smile and brags. And Kwon-shik feels awful that she has to do that. Why is life like this? Why is it like this? Asks the backbone of the family as he breaks down. He worries that Hae-joon had a terrible life because of him, but she says, "Without you I'd be an orphan in the world." With Hae-joon, Kwon-shik, and Eun-young doing manual labor, Jun-young is still the pillar of the family. But she comes home one day to tell them that she's quit her job and is starting a business of her own. She has the mindset that from the chaos comes opportunity, and she wants to ride the waves, not drown in them. However, Hae-joon has a total fit when she hears the news. She can't understand how at 50 she and Kwon-shik are still just getting by and the trouble never ends. Hearing how upset Hae-joon is with their life, Kwon-shik goes alone to buy a risky investment property, hoping to turn their luck around. It's a restaurant in a newly built commercial center that's in the middle of nowhere. Theirs is the only inhabited space in the building, and it's surrounded by nothing but open land. We'll soon learn that it's a real estate scam. He sold their cabbage field to buy this space, and it was really the cabbage field that was worth something. He got duped into selling it for cheap, so the land could be developed into expensive properties. The family is in dire straits with nowhere left to turn, and no one is driving out to their restaurant, so they're about to go fully broke. Jun-young comes through the door and tells them she got some money. She went around borrowing it, even though she's got her own problems. And now it's her turn to have a total meltdown and tell her parents the truth. She screams at Hae-joon about the pressure they always put on her to succeed, and how she can't take it anymore. "I'm sick of being the poster child. I'm sick of being the one who made it out. The pillar, the nuna, the eldest child. I'm sick of it all." Kwon-shik suddenly comes from the other room, and angrily yells his daughter's name. It's the first time he's ever raised his voice at her. And he doesn't say another word, but she breaks into sobs, covering her face. Jun-young leaves her parents' house, and both she and her mother feel awful about the conversation, holding on to both guilt and resentment. We learn that Jun-young is actually pregnant in that moment, while Hae-joon has just started menopause. Jun-young goes through a difficult labor, and Chung-sub thinks he may lose her, or their baby in the process. After a close call, both mom and baby are fine, though Chung-sub is terrified, and says there won't be a second one. It's 2001, the IMF debt is paid, Korea regains control of its economy, and they name their new baby girl Bomb, Spring. A new start is truly on the way. Without any way to sell their business, Kwon-shik and Hae-joon decide to double down and find a way to make it work by doing deliveries. If no one will come to them, they'll do the fastest delivery in town. And little by little, they make a name for themselves, until customers start venturing out to find them and eat at the restaurant. Finally, a celebrity who owes Kwon-shik a favor does a promo for them, and that's the last push to make their restaurant packed and popular. With money coming in, Hae-joon is happy, and Jun-young tells us that her parents, who once plowed the fields, became people who built landmarks. Suddenly, the commercial center starts filling in around them. At the same time, Jun-young's own business is taking off, and we see her on TV promoting it. She's built a company that's democratizing the way people study through recorded lessons. No matter where you are, or who you are, you can have classes in your hand. She tells the audience that she was inspired by her mother, who had the talent, but not the resources to go to college. But just as things are looking up and struggles get pushed to the side, Jun-young takes her parents for health exams, and they learn that Kwon-shik has cancer. It's already advanced, but they begin treatments anyway, and he has to stay at the hospital, where the doctors and staff treat him and Hae-joon like absolute shit, as they're cattle prodded and ignored. Throughout all this, Hae-joon has started writing poetry again, and one of her poems is published in a journal. It's about Kwon-shik, her love for him, and her letting him go. He's still alive to read it and see that she achieved her dream of becoming a published poet. They have a joyful moment. But when he dies, after being together their whole lives, Hae-joon doesn't know what to do with her days. She fills her notebook with poems, and another 20 years go by. Her grandkids are teens. Jun-young and In-young are both living well by working for Jun-young's business, and finally Hae-joon publishes an entire poetry book. Jun-young had sent the collection to an editor, with the note, "I'm sending you the 70 years of my parents' life. I think it's a story worth telling." And that's the story we've just witnessed, filled with love and tears and heartache and laughter, which Hae-joon has memorialized in her poems, and which Jun-young has memorialized by telling us this story and getting Hae-joon's work out into the world. Her final voiceover is a thank you to her parents, with gratitude and respect, and a nod to the show's original Korean title, "Thank you for your hard work."